When Wi-Fi isn't working, it's incredibly frustrating. I'm on location out here in Southern California at a ranch-style property that's suffering with some of those Wi-Fi woes, and I'm here to fix it properly. Longtime fans of the channel may remember a video that I did back in 2020 called Ranch House Network Design. Now, this is a really unique deployment in that it's a super long lot with a main house up front and a garage and guest house in the back. In that video, I detailed out some good, better, best network designs, each of which used a point-to-point antenna to shoot the Wi-Fi to the back house, which is now being used as an Airbnb. Long story short, that point-to-point was never established, and they've been suffering with mesh wireless to get the internet to the back of the property. And to say that it's been frustrating for the homeowners is an understatement. But now we're here on site, and we're going to give them a wireless setup that they no longer have to worry about. I'll show you what they've got today, we're going to talk about their pain points, and then I'll show you the final results after we've improved their situation. You're not going to want to miss the final outcome of this install, so let's get started. If you've seen my videos here on the channel, you've probably heard me talk about rogue support before, and the situation that I'm about to walk into here in this very video is exactly why I started that company in the first place. We've got a frustrated homeowner who's been fighting Wi-Fi issues for years. The problem isn't bad equipment, it's bad implementation. Designing a solid wireless network is half the battle even before you touch the configuration or the physical installation. If you're dealing with spotty coverage, random outages, or buffering while streaming, head on over to Rogue Support. We've got expert techs that are standing by and ready to make sure that your network just works. No frustration and no downtime. And you don't need to become a network engineer, just open up a ticket and let us handle the heavy lifting. You won't be disappointed. All right, I'm here with my good friend Isaiah, and he is the owner of this property, also the owner of LA Roots Catering. If you guys happen to be in the Los Angeles area and you want the absolute best caterer in the entire area, contact this guy right here. But I am not here to eat food. I am here to fix the Wi-Fi. So Zay, tell me a little bit about the problems that you've been experiencing.
So, we have a fairly big property. It's about an acre all in. And, we had what I thought was a pretty robust setup. And day one that we set it up, we just would have the signal would drop. We would have to go out. Well, at first we didn't know why at all. And I would unplug everything, plug everything back in, and then it would work. And then we realized that we had one access point that might have been our problem point where it would drop out when the power would go. So every time that would come down and pop back up, we'd have to unplug this access point, plug it back in, wait, and then eventually it would connect to the right configuration on a mesh setup. Also, after a few years of living here, launched an Airbnb in our back apartment. So we get a lot of people asking if there's proper Wi-Fi for them to be able to do work for a couple weeks.
They need to make Zoom calls. Exactly. They need to watch their Netflix.
And, we want the money for the Airbnb, so it was always like, yes, you're covered as long as, the power doesn't go out. Right. And we actually did have a few instances where the power would dip, because even for a second, if it would cut out, a little blip, we'd have to go reset it. And sometimes we're out of town, and so we'd have them complain, and it just was a huge headache.
And ultimately, what we suspect is happening is when the power cuts out, everything comes back online. And since it's mesh wireless, it's hit and miss which devices are the child and parent mesh of which other devices. And so ultimately you kind of had a routine where the power would go out and then you'd know that you'd have to reset certain things in a certain order to kind of get it back.
And then check the topology map, which, isn't ironclad, but it will at least tell me when everything was back to normal, which all in probably took about a half hour to an hour every time it would go out.
Yeah. All right. Well, we are here to fix that problem. And also,
please fix my problem.
just try to get like really, really good solid internet in that Airbnb so that when people are here, especially for business, they don't have any sort of problems. All right. Well, we're going to get to it.
Let's do it.
This one's a unique deployment. It's a decent sized property, but it's laid out in a long rectangle. We're working with three main areas. You've got the main house at the front. You've got a smaller man cave style building in the middle. We call it the coop because it actually was a chicken coop at one point. And then all the way in the back, we've got a garage with a second floor apartment that's being used as an Airbnb. Right now, that Airbnb is connected with a mesh wireless setup, so it isn't ideal. So we're swapping that out for a point-to-point wireless bridge. It's a dedicated link that avoids all of the weirdness that comes along with mesh Wi-Fi. But before we get there, we've got a few other network upgrades to tackle first. Starting inside the house of the router, they currently have a USG. You guys know what that is. It's that old school square white 3-port UniFi device, one of the first routers that UniFi ever came out with. And it's fine, but it's also pretty old. So we're going to swap that one out. We now have an Express 7. The USG was connected out to a hosted UniFi controller, whereas the Express 7 has UniFi on board, so we're going to have to migrate from the hosted controller to the onboard controller as part of this process. That's then connected into a US 860 watt switch. That's a great little switch. I've always loved that thing. It's got 4 PoE ports, but they are just PoE, 802.3 AF, and it's connecting out to an AC HD access point, which requires PoE+. So while that access point is working, it's getting complained about in UniFi with a warning saying that it doesn't have enough power. So we're also going to have to resolve that situation as part of this install. I want to take a second and really drive this point home. PoE compatibility matters. It's one of those things that seems simple but can absolutely trip you up. So take this setup for example. We've got the US 860 watt switch, which is technically PoE, but it doesn't deliver enough power for the AC HD access point. And sure, it works, but it's underpowered, which means poor performance and weird behavior. So when you're designing a network, always check the tech specs for every single piece of gear. PoE and PoE Plus aren't the same thing. You got to make sure you're matching the right hardware from the start. As far as the AP-AC HD itself, that's a great access point. It's got plenty of power for certainly a home of this size that has about 70 total devices connected to it. It's actually made for much more than that. It is only Wi-Fi 5, however, and we're going to stick with Wi-Fi 5 for this install. And you might say, well, Chris, you're installing all this cool stuff. Why are you staying with Wi-Fi 5? Because they have a lot of IoT devices, including Sonos and a surveillance system, and this is a full Mac/Apple family. They've got a ton of Apple devices, and if you guys have worked with UniFi, you know the Wi-Fi 7 stuff when it comes to IoT gear and Apple gear in particular isn't always the best. And since I'm not local to this install, I don't want to be flying down here to fix it, right? We're going to make sure that they're just staying on Wi-Fi 5, which we know works. Plus, then they can just reuse their existing equipment. All right, whoa, hang on a second. I just dropped a bomb right there that deserves some explanation. So to be clear, I don't think Wi-Fi 7 sucks, all right? Far from it. But I'm also not 100% confident that it's not going to cause problems with existing IoT devices. There have been plenty of reports in the UniFi forums, on Reddit, and elsewhere of devices randomly connecting and disconnecting from Wi-Fi 7 access points, especially in the 2.4 gigahertz band. I've even seen it myself with the Elgato key lights that I use at home. If you check the logs on those lights, you're going to see that those things are constantly connecting and disconnecting from my U7 Pro Max. Ubiquiti's been trying to patch this by adding features like enhanced IoT connectivity, which lets you limit an SSD to 2.4 gigahertz so that you can keep those older devices happy. And that's what I ended up doing for my lights, and while it's better now, it's still not as rock solid as Wi-Fi 5 or Wi-Fi 6. For this install that I'm working on, my buddy's got dozens of IoT devices. He's got smart lights and Sonos gear, plus a house full of iPhones. Basically, a network with lots of potential Wi-Fi 7 gremlins, right? If I lived down the street from him, I would absolutely try Wi-Fi 7 just to see how it behaves, but I don't, right? I'm in Oregon and he's in California, and I can't exactly just pop over if something goes sideways. So in this case, I'm sticking with what I know works, which is the existing Wi-Fi 5 access points. They're stable, they're proven, and they're already paid for. Now, I know a couple of you are already typing comments out there, so let's hit two obvious questions. First of all, well, why not just go with Wi-Fi 6 then if you don't want to go with Wi-Fi 7? And I'd have no problem with that. It would actually be the sort of the next logical upgrade for this network. But I didn't want to change too many variables at once, and swapping out all of those access points is going to mean extra cost for no real gain right now. And the second question might be, wait a minute, doesn't that UniFi Express 7 gateway that you're installing have built-in Wi-Fi 7? And yes, it does. But in this case, I disabled the wireless on the Express 7 and I'm only using it as a gateway. I really just didn't want to introduce any Wi-Fi 7 weirdness into the mix of this network. But the Express 7 was the only gateway that I had on hand to donate to this install. All right, so that's the reasoning. Now let's get back to the build. Inside the house, in the garage, to extend the Wi-Fi, they have one of the AC mesh access points. That's that little one with the rabbit ears on it, and that's fine. It is connected via mesh. It's not hardwired, so we'll take a look at it and see if there's an easy way to hardwire it, but if not, having that one mesh device just to extend coverage to the garage is going to be perfectly fine. And then we get out here to the patio where we have this AC Mesh Pro access point. And this is a great access point. We installed a ton of these back in the day, and this is wired through the house. They luckily left us plenty of slack, which is nice, but you can see that the cable comes out of the wall of the house. And so we don't want to replace this cable. We want to reuse it if we can. And so we're going to try to reuse this. However, we're going to get rid of this access point entirely. It's kind of redundant. They don't need this one out here. We're going to have a better spot for backyard coverage over towards the coop. But since this is going away, we're going to reuse the cable for one of the point-to-point access points, the parent side of the UDB-Pro bridge. But there's a problem, and the problem is that they are using the secondary port of this device to give data to the other AP Mesh Pro that is on the coop. Okay, so we're gonna have to figure out a way to replicate this data out to the other side, which is actually pretty nice because it's hardwired all along the fence line, and we want to keep that hardwired connection. Anytime you can hardwire something rather than run it wirelessly is always going to be a more solid connection. So here's the other end of that hardwired connection. This is what we call the coop, and you can see there's a black wire that runs here, runs down into this PoE injector, and then that is powering up this other access point. This black cable is data only, no PoE. But this was originally placed in this location so that it could provide good mesh wireless to the back house. And we don't need that anymore. We're going to have that solid point-to-point connection. So we want to move this where it provides better coverage to the entire yard. So we're going to come over here. We're going to take it off of this wall, and we're going to get it on the front of this little coop here. And then that way, its omnidirectional signal will cover the entire yard as opposed to having one over there and one over here that aren't really in the best spots for Wi-Fi. And then finally here at the back house, we've got an AP-AC HD sitting in this back window. This is picking up its signal with mesh wireless. And of course, there's a lot of problems with that. We don't like mesh wireless. We prefer either point-to-point or a hardwired connection. And also, because they've placed it in this front window to better pick up the mesh wireless signal, the orientation of this access point is not good for the building that it's in, right? So we want to change the orientation so that it's ceiling mounted. It can take good advantage of the omnidirectional nature of this antenna, but also get it out of this window and hardwire it and utilize that point-to-point connection as opposed to mesh wireless.
Reflections cracking in the mirror's face. Who's the hero, who's the ghost? I can't tell which one I trust the most. Mask your face off, peel it away.
For the point-to-point, we are going with the UDB-Pro, a pair of these UDB-Pros. This is the Device Bridge Pro. Here's the first one plugged in. Obviously, it's not going to be sitting on this chair forever. We're ultimately going to have it right up there in the eave of this roof. And it's fed by this cable that's coming through the wall, but this is only temporary as we're also going to be putting a flex switch into this little compartment. All right, so here you can see our temporary mounting solution for the other side, the child side of the UDB-Pro. Now, interesting thing to know about these devices. In order to adopt them, there's sort of a special thing that you have to do. If you have set up your parent device wired into the network, the child device has to be wireless, as in you have to provide it power, but don't actually wire it into the network. In UniFi, if you wire in the child device, it's going to assume that you're setting up another parent device. Whereas if you set it up without a connection to the network, it's then going to reach out over its point-to-point wireless and find the parent and assume that it's supposed to be a child of that parent. So if you're ever setting one of these up and you're trying to figure out why it's not working, that might be why it's not working. So in this case, we first adopted the parent side, wired into the network, and then we came over here, and this is powered, but not wired into the network, just connecting wirelessly over to the other side of the property, and we are now adopting it as the child to the parent that we first set up. Quick day one recap. We didn't get as much done as we wanted to get done, but we did get a significant amount of work done. Inside the house here, we have replaced the USG with the Express 7. That is working fine. And then out here, we were able to adopt and set up the UDB-Pro parent device, which, of course, this is not its final location. Ultimately, it will be up here, and that is on our to-do list for today. I also just received the flex switch for in here, which is also on the to-do list for today. And then I've got this temporary wire here that's supplying data all the way down this fence line to that coop access point that was on the back side of that outbuilding, which we were able to relocate up here. So now this is the only outdoor access point needed to cover this yard because it's central and it's in the right position. And we were able to decommission the patio mesh pro that was over there. That is no longer needed. So we moved this over here, and this will all be painted to match the exterior of this building. And luckily they had power right out here, so that worked out quite nicely. Inside this box, we've got the PoE injector for that Mesh Pro up top, and then you can see that goes to the Mesh Pro, and then this black cable we relocated so that it is now supplying data right here. On the back of the house here, we have the UDB-Pro child device, and this might be my favorite mounting solution of all time. We have it sort of stuffed between these rakes right here, and even though it doesn't have perfect line of sight over to the one that's on the main house, this is working great. I mean, we've already seen significant improvements in the Wi-Fi speeds to this area now that we've gotten it off of mesh wireless and onto an actual point-to-point. So right now, temporarily, we're just running it through the door here, and I've got this AC HD access point just plugged in sitting here. So today we're gonna put all this stuff on the wall, we're gonna mount everything, and then we will work to further dial everything in to make sure it is perfect.
Spin the wheel, let it go. Which side are you sure? Mask your face off, peel it away. Let the shadows come out and play. No rules, no shame, no stopping tonight. Mask your face off, step into the
This network upgrade might have looked simple on paper, but it definitely came with its share of challenges and decisions that were made to minimize disruption, keep the budget in check, and get everything wrapped up within the short window that I had on site. So let's take a look at the final design. For the gateway, we went with the UniFi Express 7. The Express 7 has got plenty of horsepower, and it pairs perfectly with the 2.5 gigabit feed that was coming in from the ISP's modem, which was Spectrum. We did disable the built-in Wi-Fi 7 access point for all of the reasons that I covered earlier, and we also swapped in the US Lite 8 PoE switch to round things out.
And the reason I went with this one and replaced the US 8 60-watt switch is because this provides 802.3 AT power, or PoE+, whereas the 60-watt switch, the US 8 60-watt, only provides AF power, 802.3 AF, which is just standard PoE. So we needed a little bit more power out to the various devices that this is powering.
The AC HD access point in the main house now has all of the power that it needs, and it's no longer showing error messages in UniFi. I also relocated that access point to a more central location for better coverage. The US Lite 8 PoE switch is also providing plenty of power to the new USW Flex switch that we installed outside. We also had the rabbit ear style mesh access point that's still in service and still meshing, but now it's the only device using mesh in the entire network.
Front of the house, we've got the parent side of the UDB-Pro point-to-point connection. That is coming right down here, and it is fed power by this flex switch right here. So this flex switch has power coming in from the house through this one cable that's run through the wall right here. And then we've got port number 2 goes out to the coop to provide data to the coop access point. And then right here, we've got the 802.3 AT power going up to that device up there.
In the far back, we've got the child side of the UDB-Pro wireless bridge, which I ran through the wall into a small utility box on the inside. Now that utility box is normally meant for a sprinkler controller, but it does work perfectly for this setup. Inside the box, we're running a dual PoE injector configuration with enough room to add a small switch later if they ever want to put in some more wired connectivity in the garage. We wall mounted the AC HD access point right above that utility box, and since it's now oriented into the house, it's performing exactly the way that it should. Once all the hardware was in place, I then fine-tuned the entire network, which basically involves making sure that the wireless channels weren't overlapping between all of the access points, and also adjusting the mesh settings so that meshing only happens where I want it to happen. When I first arrived, speed tests in the back house were under 30 megabits, and they had high latency, and it was constantly buffering if you were trying to stream anything. It was basically unusable. After this upgrade, we're now seeing 200 to 300 megabits across the entire property, and it's rock solid and smooth, and I will take that any day of the week.
We are done with this installation. I've been seeing some pretty good speeds, but I'm not the one who has to live here. What do you think? You've walked around a little bit, you've tested it out. What are you thinking now?
Night and day. It is unbelievably better. I mean, I'd call you a magician if I didn't see you actually wiring this stuff. It's insane the difference that was made. And not just that, the main point was to have solid Wi-Fi in the back, and that point-to-point setup, I mean, I'm blown away. We haven't had speeds that fast back there ever in the 5 years we've lived here. So.
I've gotten over 250 megabits solid in that back apartment.
I'm going to do movie editing back there. I'll do whatever's Wi-Fi intensive.
Use this
I'm
thing.
using it all. No, it's fantastic, man. I can't thank you enough. It is perfect, and I want you to move in.
Okay, well, I mean, you have the spot in the back. Is that cool? My wife and kids come
Airbnb,
too, or just me?
This got bigger than I thought. You're up for a visit anytime.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you very much. And like I said, thanks for letting me stay in the Airbnb while I was doing this install. And yeah, of course, if you have any problems, make sure you contact me. We will get it taken care of.
You know I will. I'm not going anywhere else ever again.
There's a saying that I like, and I don't know who said it. It might have been Bill Gates, but he said, we tend to overestimate what we can accomplish in a day and underestimate what we can accomplish in a year. Now, I always try to keep that in mind when I'm planning out an installation like this one, because it always takes more time than you think you're going to need. And this was no exception. So originally I was thinking this was going to be like 6 to 8 hours max, right? Swap out some gear, toss in a point-to-point, easy, right? But the physical labor of the installation, troubleshooting stuff that's not working the way it should, and designing around obstacles that pop up are all time consuming. And that's not to mention the detail work of making sure that everything looks nice when you leave the client site. So all in all, this install was probably closer to 14 to 16 man hours, but it's done, and I'm really super happy with the result. If you're going to take anything away from this video, it's this. Point-to-point wireless is always better than mesh wireless, and hardwiring is always better than point-to-point. So design accordingly. Okay, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and we'll see you in the next one.
Under the skin, what do you find? A tangled mess or a diamond mine? Rip it open, don't look back.